She did not cry when he left. Not once. Not in front of anyone. Not behind closed doors, where no one could have seen her, even if she had. The whole village woke up that Saturday morning, expecting a wedding. The women who had cooked through the night were still setting out the food. The elders were already dressed. The children had been put into clean clothes and told not to get dirty. The drummers had arrived early and were warming their hands by a small fire near the entrance to the compound. And then the word came, carried by a cousin who could not look anyone in the eye. No wedding. Emeka was gone. He had made other arrangements. Other arrangements? That was the phrase they used. The whole village turned its eyes to Amara. She was standing in the courtyard of her father's house, still dressed in the white wedding cloth she had laid out the night before with her own hands. She looked at the cousin who had brought the message. She looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up the white cloth from where it had been spread across the chair beside her. She folded it, slowly, carefully, the way you fold something precious, and she set it down. And she walked inside. She did not run. She did not scream. She did not give the village the collapse they were already preparing themselves to witness. They thought she was broken. They could not have been more wrong. This is the story of Amara, a woman who was left with nothing, who walked barefoot into the unknown, and who rose, not because someone rescued her, but because she refused, absolutely refused, to let what had been done to her decide who she became. Stay with me all the way to the end of this story, because the moment when Emeka walks into that great hall, the moment he finally understands what he lost, that moment will stay with you for a long time. To understand what Amara lost that morning, you have to understand what she had and how carefully it had been built. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe so you never miss a story, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Amara was 24 years old. She was the firstborn daughter of Chukwuemeka, a cloth merchant from the village of Ot. Her father was not a rich man, but he was a respected one, a man who paid his debts, kept his word, and was known across 3 markets for the quality of the fabric he sourced and the honesty with which he priced it. In a village where reputation was a currency as real as any other, her family's name was worth something. Her mother had died when Amara was 11 years old, a fever that took hold in the rainy season and did not let go. Amara had sat beside her mother for the last 4 days of her life, keeping the cloth cool on her forehead. Learning without knowing, she was learning what it looks like when a person leaves quietly and with dignity. Her mother did not rage. She called each of her children to her side and said what she needed to say to each one. She asked Amara, the oldest, to take care of the younger ones. Amara said yes. She had kept that promise every day for 13 years. After her mother died, Amara ran the household. She was 11 years old, and she cooked, cleaned, managed the food stores, kept track of what they needed, made sure her brothers were fed and ready for school, helped her father with the ledger on the evenings when he was too tired to add the numbers straight. She did not do these things because she had been forced to. She did them because she understood, at an age when most children are thinking only of play, that a family is a structure, and a structure needs someone to hold it together, and she was the one who was there. This is the kind of woman she was before Emeka ever looked at her. Already built, already formed, already carrying more than most adults, carrying it without complaint, without drama, without expecting anyone to notice. Emeka noticed. Eventually, he was the second son of the village chief, 27 years old, good-looking in the way that second sons of powerful men often are, blessed with the softness that comes from never having been made truly uncomfortable. He had a wide smile and a confident stride, and he spoke to people as though he were already giving them a gift, just by speaking. He had seen Amara at the market twice before he worked up the intention to act. She was behind her father's cloth stall, handling a negotiation with a woman twice her age who was trying to talk the price down. Amara listened to everything the woman said. She considered it. And then she explained, calmly and specifically, exactly why the price was what it was. The quality of the thread, the distance it had traveled, the hours of work in the weaving. She was not rude. She was not apologetic. She was simply clear. The woman bought 2 lengths of cloth. Emeka came back to that market stall 3 times before he spoke to Amara. He watched her work. He was fascinated by the particular quality she had. The quality of being completely uninterested in performing for anyone. She was not trying to seem impressive. She simply was what she was, In every moment, when he finally spoke to her father and began the proper process of courtship, her father received him with respect and appropriate caution. A chief's son was not automatically a good match. Power could protect a daughter. Power could also damage one. He watched Emeka. He asked questions. He spoke to the elders. He took the 4 months of the courtship process seriously. Everything seemed correct. The wedding preparations went forward, and they were real preparations, not just a ceremony, but a commitment. Her father gave cloth from his best stock. The family called on every favor they were owed to make the celebration worthy of the occasion. Amara sewed details into her own wedding cloth by hand. In the evenings, by lamplight. Small patterns at the hem, her mother's favorite color, threaded through the border. She was not naive about what marriage meant. She was not marrying for romance. She was marrying because Emeka had done everything correctly, because the families had agreed, because the community had witnessed, because a woman in Otuchek built her future through the right partnerships, and this was the right one. She was ready. And then, the night before the wedding, Emeka was gone. No letter, no message delivered to her directly. A cousin sent in the morning, with a few words he clearly wished he did not have to say. No wedding. Other arrangements? The village turned, and here is what village eyes do to a woman who has been publicly humiliated. They watch for the collapse. They are not always cruel people. Some of them are kind people who cannot help the part of themselves that leans toward the drama of a fall. They watched Amara to see what she would do with the shame. She did not give it to them. For 7 days, she went about her life. She cooked, she helped her father at the stall. She took care of her brothers. When women spoke to her with the particular softness of pity, she thanked them without bitterness and without invitation for more. When men looked at her with the particular look that says a woman who has been left is diminished, she met their eyes until they looked away. She absorbed the weak. She felt it. She was not made of stone. She felt every part of it. The humiliation and the grief and the particular specific pain of realizing that someone had looked at everything. She was, and decided it was not enough to stay for. She felt it. And then she made a decision. On the 8th morning, before her father was awake, she took down the cloth bundle from the top shelf in her room and began to pack. She packed one change of clothing, her mother's small hand mirror, a folded piece of paper on which she had written a few things she never wanted to forget. Things her mother had told her when she was 11, things she had figured out herself in the years since. Her father's ledger, which she had updated the night before and left on the table for him with a note explaining every column. She left her good sandals for her youngest brother. His feet had grown and his sandals were worn through at the heel. Her feet would manage. She woke her father. She held him for a long time without speaking. He held her back and did not ask her not to go. He understood. The way fathers who have raised strong daughters understand that asking her to stay would have been asking her to become less than she was. He pressed a small amount of money into her hand. She tried to refuse. He closed her fingers around it and said, for the first night, she held each of her brothers. The youngest cried. She told him she would send for him when she was settled. She told him she would not disappear the way their mother had disappeared. She would write. She would send grain. She would come back when she could. Then she walked out of the compound before the village could arrange its face into whatever expression it was preparing. She walked east, toward the hills, toward a kingdom she had only heard described in the stories of traveling merchants, toward a queen mother whose reputation for fairness had made its way even to a small village market 3 days' walk away. She had nothing except what she was. It had always been enough. She was going to prove it again. The road east was 3 days of walking on a woman with good sandals. For Amara, barefoot on roads that shifted between packed red earth and sharp stone and soft river mud, it was closer to 4. She stopped the first night at a roadside shelter, a roof on 4 poles, used by traders moving between markets. She shared it with 2 older men who were carrying smoked fish north in baskets balanced on their heads. They shared their fire. She shared the small yam she had cooked before leaving. Nobody asked too many questions. People who travel alone and on foot have usually already answered all the questions they needed to answer before they left. The second night, she slept under a wide canopied tree near a stream, wrapped in her extra cloth, listening to the night sounds of the bush, the frogs, the insects, the occasional distant call of something she decided not to identify. She was not afraid of the dark. She had never particularly been afraid of anything she could see clearly. It was the things people hid that frightened her, and those things lived in villages, not in forests. The third day she arrived at the edge of the kingdom of Abanari. She knew she had entered a different place even before she saw the palace. The roads were wider and better maintained. The market at the base of the hill was 3 times the size of Otuk's market, spread across a clearing with permanent wooden stalls and a proper weighing station where a woman in a yellow cloth presided over disputes with a calm authority that Amara noted and filed away. Order, in a place this size, meant someone was governing it well. The palace itself sat at the top of the long hill, a compound of red-painted walls and thatched roofs arranged around inner courtyards, large enough to house hundreds of people, with entrances on 4 sides and guards stationed at each one. She had not been inside a palace before. She stood at the base of the hill for a while and looked at it, not with fear, not with awe exactly, but with the focused attention of someone memorizing the shape of a problem before beginning to solve it. She went first to the market and exchanged the last of the cloth she was carrying, a small piece from her father's store that she had folded into the bundle for exactly this purpose, for water, a hot meal, and information. The woman at the food stall had worked near the palace for 15 years and knew everything about who came and went and why. She told Amara. The east gate was the servants' entrance. The gatekeeper there was a man named Ez, who was more interested in following rules than in being cruel about them. If she had a skill and was prepared to work, the best way in was through patience and through usefulness. Amara thanked her and walked up the hill. Ez was, as described, a man of rules rather than cruelty. He looked at Amara the way a man who has seen many people try to enter a place they have no obvious reason to be in looks at them with a practiced suspicion that was not personal. He asked who she knew inside. She said no one. He told her to wait at the side of the gate. She sat on the low stone at the side of the entrance and waited. She did not pace. She did not keep approaching Ez with the same question. She sat and she breathed and she watched the movement of people through the gate. Servants coming and going with clay pots and baskets and messages, a group of women arriving with bundles of fabric, a man leading 2 goats. Toward the kitchen compound, she mapped what she could see. She stayed still. An old woman came through the gate, carrying 2 large clay pots of water, one balanced on her head and one gripped in each hand. She was moving slowly, not because she was weak, but because the pots were at the edge of what one person could safely carry, and she knew it and was compensating with every step. The pot on her right side was tilting. Amara stood before she had consciously decided to stand. She crossed a few steps to the woman and steadied the tilting pot with both hands. She did not ask permission. There was not time to ask permission. The pot was about to go over. The old woman exhaled. "Thank you," she said, with the particular directness of someone who has spent a long life working too hard to waste breath on elaborate politeness. "I can carry it," Amara said. "You are not supposed to be through this gate," the old woman said. "I know," Amara said, "but the pot is still heavy." The old woman looked at her. A long look. The look of someone who has spent decades reading people quickly and accurately because their survival has depended on getting it right. "Come then," the old woman said, and Amara walked through the east gate of the palace of Obanari, carrying half the water, before the gatekeeper had finished deciding whether to stop her. The old woman was Mama Chidi. She was 63 years old, had worked in the palace for 31 years, had outlasted 3 kings, 2 queens, 1 coup attempt, and 4 head stewards. She knew everything and everyone. More importantly, she understood everything she knew, which is a different and rarer skill. She asked Amara her name in the kitchen courtyard, setting the pots down by the large stone sink. Amara told her. She asked where she had come from. Amara told her all of it, not to make Mama Chidi feel sorry for her, not to perform suffering. She told her because Mama Chidi had asked a direct question, and Amara answered direct questions directly. She had been left the night before her wedding. She had packed a bundle and walked east. She was here because she had heard this was a place where a person's character counted for more than their connections. Mama Chidi listened to every word. When Amara finished, the old woman was quiet for a moment. Then she pointed to a large clay pot at the far end of the courtyard. That pot needs to be filled before evening prayers. The well is behind the fig tree. It was not an invitation. It was not an offer. It was a test disguised as an instruction, and Amara understood it as such. She picked up the pot. She found the well behind the fig tree. She carried it back without spilling a drop, set it in its place, and looked at Mama Chitty. Mama Chitty nodded once. This exchange, a woman in crisis, a heavy pot, a well, a nod, was the beginning of everything. Amara filled that pot every evening for 11 days. No one officially told her she had a job. No one gave her a sleeping mat or a food portion. She came each morning. She worked. She filled what needed filling. She helped where help was needed, and she slept in the covered area near the kitchen, where Mama Chitty told her she could put her bundle. On the 12th day, Mama Chitty spoke to the palace steward. The steward was a meticulous man who kept records in a small bound book, and who did not add names to that book without being confident of his reasons. He had heard Mama Chitty's recommendations before. She did not give them lightly. He interviewed Amara himself, questions about what she knew, what she had done, where she had come from. She answered everything. He wrote her name in the book. She was given a sleeping mat in the servants' quarters, a weekly portion of grain and palm oil, and the title of water carrier, second class. She was, in the formal record of the Palace of Obaneri, at the very bottom. She went to sleep that night on her mat in the servants' quarters, listening to the breathing of 15 other women around her, and she felt something that surprised her. Not happiness exactly. Not relief. Something quieter and more specific. The particular feeling of a woman who has decided to begin again, and has, for the first time, a floor beneath her feet to begin from. She could work with a floor. She carried water. She ground grain before sunrise. She washed the large clay cooking pots in the river at the bottom of the hill, scrubbing them with sand until they shone. She was given the worst tasks, the heaviest, the most repetitive, the most invisible, because she was new and low-ranked, and that is what the low-ranked and new receive. She did not complain. She did not shrink. She did not look sideways at the women above her in the hierarchy with resentment, but she also, and this is the part that the other servants discussed when she was not in the room, she never let anyone speak to her as though she were less than she was. She would not make a scene. She was not combative, but when a senior servant spoke to her with a contempt that crossed a certain line, not the ordinary briskness of rank, but the deliberate diminishment of a person who wants you to feel small, Amara would stop what she was doing and look at that person, fully, directly, with a calm and level gaze that said, without words, I see you. I am not afraid of you. I am simply waiting for you to remember your manners. They always looked away first. This made some women uneasy. It made others, quietly, respect her. And it made one person, watching from a distance, begin to pay very close attention. The Queen Mother's name was Adaze. She was 61 years old, and she had lived inside the Palace of Abanari for 35 of those years, first as a young bride, then as the wife of a king, then as a widow, then as a queen mother whose son had taken the throne with her council, shaping every major decision he made. She was, by any measure, one of the most powerful people in the kingdom, not in the way that is announced, in the way that actually works, the quiet, structural, load-bearing power of someone who understands how things really function, who people actually trust, and where the decisions that look like one man's choices actually come from. She had a practice she had kept for 20 years without telling anyone about it. Every morning, at the first light, before her attendants came to dress her, and before the day's business began, she took her tea to the carved wooden screen in her chambers that overlooked the eastern courtyard. She sat there alone, and she watched. She watched how people treated each other when they believed no one important was watching. She watched who helped without being asked, who complained the moment difficulty arrived, who was kind to the junior servants, and who saved their courtesy only for those above them, who told the truth in small things, and who adjusted the truth for convenience. 20 years of early mornings had given her a knowledge of the actual character of the people in her palace that no report, no meeting, and no official introduction could have provided. She had been watching Amara since the 3rd week of her arrival. At first, she watched the way she watched everyone new, with professional attention, gathering data. The girl was disciplined. That was clear from the beginning, consistent in a way that went beyond effort. She was not trying hard, she was simply being what she was, fully, every day, and what she was happened to require a great deal of steadiness. The second thing the Queen Mother noticed was the stillness. Not stillness of the body. Amara worked hard physically and was constantly in motion. Stillness of the interior. She was not rattled by difficulty. She did not need approval to function. She moved through the hierarchy of the servants' courtyard without ambition and without self-pity, which was extraordinary in a place where most people were either climbing or resenting the fact that they were not climbing. The third thing, the thing that made the Queen Mother begin to plan, was what she witnessed on a morning in Amara's 5th week. One of the head servants, a woman named Bisi, who had been in the palace for 12 years and who had long ago mistaken duration of service for superiority of character, had taken a dislike to Amara. Amara did not know why, or if she knew, she had decided it was not worth understanding. Bisi spoke to her with an edge that was just inside the boundary of what was acceptable in the hierarchy, in that careful way that people who want to wound without consequences always operate. That particular morning, Bisi had told Amara to redo a task she had already completed correctly. The pots were clean. Bisi knew the pots were clean. She looked at them, looked at Amara, and told her the rim of the third pot was not clean enough, and she would have to take them all back to the river. The other water carriers watched. Amara looked at the pot. She looked at the rim. She looked at Bisi. And then she said, very calmly, "The pot is clean. The rim is clean. I cleaned it before sunrise this morning. I will clean it again, if you tell me specifically what the problem is. But I need you to show me the problem so I understand what I am trying to fix." Bisi had not expected this. She had expected either apology or sulking. She had not expected a request for specificity. She could not show Amara a problem, because there was no problem. After a silence that lasted a bit too long, she waved her hand and walked away. The Queen Mother had seen every moment of it, from behind her screen. She waited 2 more weeks. She continued watching. She needed to be sure that what she was seeing was character, and not performance. That Amara was not putting on a show of dignity that would dissolve under pressure. She created small opportunities to test it. A misdirected task, a shortage of supplies that would require someone to improvise, a moment when 2 servants were in conflict and needed an older voice to mediate. Each time, Amara responded the same way. Directly, calmly, without drama. On a Tuesday morning in Amara's 7th week, the Queen Mother did not sit behind her screen. She walked out into the courtyard at the hour when the light was still low and orange, and she sat on the stone bench near the fig tree. She was dressed simply. She had not told her attendants where she was going. Amara came to the fig tree, carrying 2 full pots. Set them down with the careful deliberateness of someone who has learned exactly how much force causes a pot to crack on stone, and then stood and stretched her back with a quiet exhale, a sound of someone alone, not performing. "Your back troubles you," the Queen Mother said. Amara turned. She recognized her immediately. She had seen her at palace ceremonies. She knew the shape of her face and the quality of her stillness. She did not panic. She bowed properly. The full, correct bow, held for the right count, and then straightened. "It will pass, Great Mother," she said. "The morning pots are the heaviest. After the first round, the body remembers what it is doing." The Queen Mother said, "You speak like a woman who has carried harder things than water pots." Amara looked at her steadily. "Most women have, Great Mother." There was a silence. The birds in the fig tree were making their morning noise. A goat somewhere in the far compound announced itself. The light was turning from orange to gold. The Queen Mother said, "Come and sit." Amara sat beside the Queen Mother of the Kingdom of Oba-Nare on a stone bench near a fig tree, and they talked for an hour. The Queen Mother asked questions about her life, her father, the village she had come from, what she thought of the palace, what she had observed about the way things worked here, what she believed made a community just and what made it unjust. She asked with genuine curiosity, not with the practiced patience of someone simply gathering information. Amara answered the way she answered everything. Completely, plainly, without flattery, without false modesty, without adjusting her words to what she guessed the Queen Mother wanted to hear. She said what she thought. She admitted freely what she did not know. When she disagreed with something the Queen Mother suggested, she said so not rudely, but clearly, with her reasons. The Queen Mother had spent 40 years surrounded by people who told her what they thought she wanted to hear. The rarity of the thing in front of her was so great that she had to work to keep her face still and not let it show. She called Amara to her chambers on Friday of that same week, and the Friday after, and the Tuesday after that, and then, without formal announcement, without a new title, Amara was simply present in the Queen Mother's receiving room, bringing the morning tea, staying to listen during meetings, occasionally asks a question, sometimes just present and steady in the way that a trusted person can be present without taking up space that isn't theirs. The palace notices spread in palaces the way smoke spreads through a building, through every available gap, silently, until the smell is everywhere. The senior servants regarded Amara with a new caution. The attendants who had been close to the Queen Mother for years watched her with an unease they could not fully name. They could not find anything wrong with her. She was not maneuvering. She was not building alliances. She was not performing closeness to the Queen Mother in ways designed to be seen. She simply came when called, listened when present, and answered honestly when spoken to. And the Queen Mother kept summoning her back. What they did not understand was that the Queen Mother was not rewarding ambition or strategy or cleverness. She was rewarding a quality so rare in a palace that she had stopped expecting to find it. She was rewarding a woman who had been publicly humiliated, stripped of her future, left with nothing, and had not allowed any of it to make her bitter or small or dishonest. The teaching began without ceremony. The Queen Mother simply began including Amara in everything. The provisioning decisions, the management of disputes between staff, the careful protocol of receiving messengers from other kingdoms, the reading of correspondence when the Queen Mother's eyes were tired, the preparation for seasonal ceremonies. Amara learned the language of position and precedence in palace governance with the same total attention she had brought to learning which pots cracked under which pressure. She was not learning in order to rise. She was learning because knowledge was a tool, and she had always believed in knowing how to use every tool available to her. 3 years passed, then 4, then 6, then 9. The girl who had arrived barefoot was now the person the Queen Mother trusted most in the entire palace. She had no formal title. She needed none. Everyone knew. The head steward consulted her before making large decisions. The senior servants, including BC, addressed her with a care they had not shown in the early years. Messengers from other kingdoms, briefed before their arrival, were told to present their documents to the Queen Mother's advisor. They would find a woman of quiet authority sitting just to the left of the Queen Mother's chair. Amara still slept in the same wing of the palace. She had not upgraded her quarters, had not accumulated jewelry, had not done any of the things that people who have power usually do to display it. She had sent grain to her father 3 times a year, every year. She had brought her youngest brother to the palace kitchen when he was old enough to work, and her second brother to the stable. She thought about Otuk occasionally, the market, the road. The morning she had walked away from it in the dark, she thought about her mother. She thought about the white wedding cloth she had folded and put down. She thought about Emeka very rarely, and when she did, it was with something that had moved past grief and past anger into a kind of neutral distance. The way you regard a storm that happened years ago. It happened. It passed. The ground is dry now. She was inside the palace that had started as a stranger's gate, completely at home. She had built that home from nothing. One honest answer at a time. In the 9th year of Amara's time at the palace, the king's wife died. She died of a fever that took hold quickly and moved faster than the healers could follow. She was 40 years old and had been the king's wife for 17 years. She was a woman of great patience and good humor, and she was mourned genuinely, not the performed mourning of political courtesy, but the real mourning that comes when a person who made the days lighter is no longer there to do it. The palace was quiet for a long time after. The king, Obina, was 42 years old. He had ruled well. He was not a king who needed to be dramatic or cruel to be taken seriously. He was the kind of man who made decisions with enough time and information that the decisions were almost always correct, and who acknowledged it openly on the rare occasion they were not. He had 2 grown sons in training for governance. He had allies in every direction. He was not politically incomplete, but he was, in the way that human beings become incomplete when someone who has shared their interior life is suddenly gone, genuinely lost. His mother came to him 3 weeks after the burial, when the formal mourning period had ended and the palace was beginning to remember how to be loud again. She told him plainly that she believed he needed a partner. Not for ceremony, not for alliance, for the actual work of being a person who holds a great deal of responsibility, someone who could sit across from him in the quiet hours and think alongside him, who understood the kingdom the way he understood it, whose judgment he could trust in the middle of the night when no one else was awake. He said he trusted her judgment in all things. She said that was the correct answer, and that she had a name. He asked whose. She told him. He was quiet. He looked at the wall for a moment. Then he said that he had seen Amara many times in the corridors and in the receiving room and in the council meetings, and that he had always noticed, without particularly meaning to, that she was the person in every room who spoke least and understood most. He said he had heard her ask a question once during a council meeting that had quietly rerouted the entire direction of a decision, and that no one who had not been paying close attention would have seen that she had done it. His mother said, "Yes, that is the one." He said, "Then there is no discussion." His mother said, "There is always discussion. Protocol. Elders, families." He needed to be patient. She would conduct the process correctly. She would protect Amara's dignity through it the same way. Amara had protected her own dignity through everything she had faced. He said, "How long?" she said. "However long it takes to do it right." It took 4 months. The elders were assembled and consulted. They asked the questions that elders ask about lineage, about character, about the suitability of a woman from a modest merchant family for the role of queen. The Queen Mother answered every question fully, with the prepared patience of a woman who has been conducting difficult conversations for 35 years. She told them about the fig tree. She told them about the water pots. She told them what she had observed from behind a carved wooden screen for 6 weeks before she trusted what she was seeing. She told them about the morning BC had tried to make Amara feel small, and what Amara had done, and what it meant about who she was. The elders listened. They deliberated. They visited Amara's father in Otuchu, a formal visit, with proper ceremony. The kind of visit that announces to a village that something significant is about to happen. Her father received them in his cloth merchant's courtyard in his best cloth, and cried without embarrassment from the moment they began to explain why they had come until long after they had finished. The announcement was made at the new moon ceremony in front of the full palace court, with every official and elder present. The great hall was arranged for maximum witness. That was intentional. The Queen Mother believed that public processes required public confirmation, and that Amara's elevation deserved to be seen by every person who had seen her carry water pots. Amara stood in ivory cloth, with gold at her wrists, and she listened to her name spoken beside the king's name, and she felt the long, slow exhale of a woman who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time, and has finally been permitted to set it down. She did not look triumphant. She looked calm. She had always been calm, but this was a different calm. Not the calm of endurance, not the calm of someone holding themselves together in difficult conditions. This was the calm of arrival, the calm of a woman who has walked a road longer than she chose, harder than she deserved, and has stepped off it into exactly the right place. She thought of the cloth bundle, the barefoot road, the sleeping mat, the morning pots, the fig tree, the carved wooden screen, the years of questions answered honestly, of tasks completed fully, of small dignities defended quietly. She had not taken a shortcut. She had not been rescued. She had not been lucky in the way that people mean when they say the word to suggest that success is random. She had been, every single day, entirely and completely herself, and herself had been, turn it out, more than enough. She let the announcement wash over her. The hall was very loud. She stood in it quietly, and let it be loud. News travels on its own schedule. In kingdoms where roads are walked by traders and spoken words carry from market to market in long chains, the announcement of a new queen reaches some places within days, and others across the span of weeks or months, depending on how many markets lie between the palace and the listener. The news reached Ochuk in the 4th week. It arrived the way all significant news arrives in a small village. First as a rumor, half a sentence carried by a trader passing through. Then as a report from someone who had been in the eastern market and had heard more detail. And finally as a confirmed account from one of the elders who had made the journey to the new moon ceremony and had stood in the great hall and seen it himself. The village received it in various ways. Amara's old neighbors said among themselves that they had always known, that they had always seen in her something different. That they had said so at the time, conveniently forgetting what they had actually said at the time, which had been considerably less generous. Amara's father said nothing to anyone for 3 days. He simply sat in his courtyard in the evenings and looked at the sky in the direction of the east and made a sound, periodically. That was not quite a word, and not quite a prayer, but was something between the two. And Amika heard the news, and knew whose name had been spoken, before the full account had even finished reaching him. He was 37 now. His father had died 2 years earlier, and he had inherited the chieftaincy, the title, the compound, the expectations. The reality beneath the title was considerably thinner than it appeared. The village's fortunes had declined. There had been land disputes that had not been handled well. The younger generation was leaving for the cities. Eada wife, a woman from a family his father had needed alliance with, a correct and cold arrangement that had produced 2 children and very little else. He was not an unhappy man in any dramatic way. He was the subtler kind of unhappy. The kind that comes from having made choices that were convenient in the moment, and then having to live inside them indefinitely. He had thought about Amara over the years, not constantly. But the thought of her had become a permanent piece of furniture in the interior of his mind, always there, never possible to rearrange or remove. The thought had a specific shape. The morning he left. The explanation he had never given. The way she had not pursued him, had not sent a message demanding an answer, had simply picked up her cloth and walked east, and disappeared from his life with the same composure she had brought to everything else. He had told himself many things about it over the years, that it had been the right decision, that the other arrangement had been necessary. It had not. But people who have done something they know was wrong develop elaborate structures of retrospective necessity to live inside. That she had probably been fine. That women recover. He had believed these things in the way you believe things you need to believe. And now her name was being spoken in a great hall. In a palace, beside a king's name. He made the journey to Oba Neri without telling his wife where he was going. He told the household he had business in the east. He packed his good cloth and his formal cap and his silver rings, the things a chief wears when he wants to present correctly. He arrived at the palace gate and told the gatekeeper he was the chief of Otuchi, here to pay his respects to the new queen at the public receiving hour. The gatekeeper wrote his name in the register, Emeka of Ochuch. He was shown into the great hall with the other visitors who had come for the public hour, a crowded room, petitioners and well-wishers and traders seeking favor and delegation members seeking meetings, arranged in the long rows of wooden benches that faced the dais at the far end. Emeka sat and waited. He had not prepared for what he was actually going to say. He had not prepared for this in the specific way that people who have done something wrong tend not to prepare. He had a vague idea of dignity restored, of an explanation offered, of some gesture toward a past that could not be changed, but might possibly be acknowledged. He had thought about it the entire journey without arriving at any words that felt adequate, and he was still thinking about it when the doors at the far end of the hall opened. She walked in the way that women who have spent years learning the weight and shape of their own authority walk, not slowly for effect, not quickly with urgency, but at the pace of someone who has exactly as much time as is needed and knows it. She was in deep blue cloth with gold at her throat and wrists, and the particular composure of someone who has been composed through harder things than this. She sat. She looked at the room with a level gaze, he remembered. The gaze that saw everything and responded to nothing until it chose to respond. And then her eyes found him. A pause. Small. Not visible to anyone who was not watching very carefully. The pause of a woman whose body registers a thing a half-second before the mind decides what to do with it. And then, nothing. Her gaze moved on. She looked at the next section of the hall, the next row of benches, with the same level attention. She received the first petition, a dispute between two trading families over a warehouse lease. She listened, asked 3 specific questions, and gave a direction that resolved it cleanly. She moved to the next, a request from a village delegation for an audience about water access. She scheduled it. She moved to the next. Emeka sat in his place and felt the specific, total weight of being in a room where someone has chosen not to see you. Not overlooked, not missed. Chosen. The difference between those two things is enormous, and he felt every part of it. The receiving hour ended. She rose. She looked at the room once more. The final accounting look, and her eyes passed over the place where he was sitting the way they passed over the carved wooden pillars and the high afternoon light coming through the windows. She walked back through the far doors. He waited another hour. He sat in the emptying hall while the benches cleared around him, telling himself she would send someone a message. An invitation for a private moment. Some acknowledgement that she had seen him, that his presence here meant something, that the journey deserved a response. No one came. Eventually, a young attendant came through the hall with a cloth, beginning to straighten the benches for the next day's business. He glanced at Emeka, a man sitting alone in an empty hall, with the polite blankness of someone who has learned not to ask questions about the things he sees. Emeka stood. He straightened his cap. Walk out. The gatekeeper, later, described it to Mama Chidi, the chief from Otush, who had come in formal dress and silver rings and had sat through the full receiving hour, and then sat alone in the empty hall for another hour, and had finally left looking like a man who had walked a long road to knock on a door and arrived to find the door had simply ceased to care whether he knocked. Mama Chidi brought this account to Amara that evening, as she had learned to bring her every significant piece of information that moved through the palace. Amara listened to all of it. She was quiet for a moment after Mama Chidi finished. She looked at the small window in her chamber, the one that faced east, toward the hills that lay between this palace and a village she had left in the dark 9 years ago. She thought of the white cloth she had folded, the bare feet on the red road, the stone at the side of the gate where she had sat and waited without pacing. Then she looked back at Mama Chidi and she said, "Good." Not with triumph, not with bitterness, not with the satisfaction of revenge, with the simple, clean finality of a woman closing a chapter that had been finished for a long time. A woman confirming, to herself more than to anyone, that she had been right, that walking away had been right, that every single step of the road that had brought her here, barefoot, alone, with nothing but what she was, had been exactly correct. She had not waited for him to come back. She had not spent 9 years hoping he would. She had spent 9 years building, carrying water, telling the truth, learning the shape of power, earning the trust of a woman who had spent 30 years looking for exactly what Amara was. She had built a life so full and so completely hers that when he finally appeared in the hall that had been built around her choices, there was simply no room left in it for his regret. "Good," she said again, quietly, and she turned back to the correspondence on her table. That is the story of Amara, the woman who was left with nothing and who understood, in the early morning silence of the 8th day, that nothing is not the same as empty. She still had herself. She still had the thing her mother had modeled and her father had honored, and her years of keeping a household together had built in her, bone by bone, the capacity to be completely and honestly herself under any pressure, in any room, at any rank. That was not nothing. That was the most valuable thing a person can carry. She carried it barefoot across 3 days of road, and she set it down in a palace courtyard and she let it work. There is something I need to say clearly, because I think this story is sometimes misread. Amara did not succeed because she was patient enough for a powerful person to notice her. The Queen Mother is not the reason Amara rose. The Queen Mother is the person who recognized something that was already there. The distinction matters enormously. Amara was not built by the Queen Mother's attention. She was built long before that. In the years of running a household at 11, in the years of the cloth stall, in the 7 days, she stood inside her own humiliation and did not let it change the shape of her. The Queen Mother did not lift her. The Queen Mother simply had the eyes to see what was already standing. That is what this story is really about. Not luck, not rescue, not being seen by the right person at the right time. It is about the woman who keeps the full, undamaged, unhardened truth of herself intact through the kinds of circumstances that most people use as permission to become smaller, bitter, closed, strategic, in the wrong way, spending their energy on making others suffer rather than on building something worth protecting. Amara never became smaller. And so, when Emeka walked into the great hall in his good cloth and his silver rings, a chief come to pay his respects. Come perhaps to explain, come perhaps to feel something of what he had given away. He found a room that had been built by her choices, for her life, around a throne that was entirely and completely hers. She did not need to speak. She did not need to acknowledge him. She did not need to be seen refusing to speak or refusing to look. She simply had somewhere more important to look. There were people in that hall with real petitions and real needs, and a queen with the intelligence and the authority to address them. He was not one of those people. He was someone who had once been part of a chapter that was now closed. The chapter was closed. The book had moved on, and there was no space in the new chapter for his regret, however large it had grown. She was always a queen. She was simply waiting for a room large enough to prove it, and the room found her not because she stood still and hoped, because she walked, because she kept walking. Because she walked barefoot on red roads and carried heavy pots, and told the truth to a woman behind a carved screen, and learned the shape of governance, and held the Queen Mother's correspondence, and answered every question honestly, and never, not once, allowed anyone to make her feel that what had been done to her was a reflection of her worth. That is how the room found her. She built the road to it, step by barefoot step. If this story moved something in you, share it. Send it to someone who is in the middle of a road that is harder than they chose. Someone who is carrying water pots and wondering if the fig tree is real. Tell them the fig tree is real. Keep walking. And if you are new here, welcome. There are 5 more stories in this series. Ancient wisdom, carried in the voices of women who rose when the world told them to stay down. We tell those stories here. Subscribe. Leave a comment telling me which moment in this story stayed with you the longest. I read every one. I will see you in the next story.